Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today for what will be a terrific conversation with our esteemed guest, Professor Esther Duflo, here at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We'll hear from Dr. Duflo about her groundbreaking research and approaches to poverty alleviation, and we'll also talk in depth about her teaching and how sharing teaching openly through MIT Open Learning and more broadly has had a transformative impact on the lives of people at MIT and around the world. I'm Chris Capozzola. I'm our Senior Associate Dean for Open Learning here at MIT. And this is the second event in the Open Conversation series that Open Learning hosts that focuses on how Open Learning can empower people to improve their lives, communities, and the world. And our special guest today is Professor Esther Duflo. And I have the pleasure of introducing her, her accomplishments are many, and her achievements are phenomenal. I will just briefly introduce you to her as a researcher and a scholar. Dr. Duflo is the Abdul Latif Jamil Professor of Poverty Alleviation and Development Economics here at MIT. She's the co-founder and co-director of the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab and chair of Pauvreté et Politique Publique at the Collège de France. In her research, she seeks to understand the economic lives of people who live in poverty with the aim of designing and evaluating rigorously social policies for poverty alleviation. She's worked on health, on education, financial inclusion, environment and sustainability, and governance. And she has been the recipient of numerous academic honors and prizes, many of which are what probably encouraged you to log in here today, including, of course, the 2019 Nobel Prize in Economics, which she shared with co-laureates Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kramer, a John Bates Clark Medal, and the MacArthur so-called Genius Fellowship, to name just a few among many. She's the author most recently of the prize-winning book, Poor Economics, a radical rethinking of the way to fight global poverty, which I encourage you to check out. And dear to our heart here at MIT, she is a dedicated and innovative teacher, not only here on our campus in both graduate and undergraduate education, but in conjunction with Open Learning, where she shares her teaching with tens of thousands of learners worldwide. So what we'll be doing for the next hour is sort of talking back and forth with Dr. Duflo. We're going to sort of hear some of her passions for teaching and learning, some of her insights and thoughts right now about poverty alleviation and challenges in economics as practiced in the world. And we'll be bringing in questions from our audience. Some of those are questions that have come to the audience ahead of time, and some are ones that you can continue to offer if you're watching this live. So I'm going to just start off by giving you the floor, right? And I'd love to just hear a little bit about you and what inspired you to kind of take this path for research and to focus on economics, public policy, and really using data to advance poverty alleviation.
First of all, thank you. Thank you all for being here online and in person. I know there are so many things happening at the end of May on campus that it's pretty phenomenal that you made it here. Most people, I think, find a field of study and then they look for a topic. And I went the other way. I had a topic and then I had finally found the field of study that would fit to that topic. So from really an early age, I was very exposed to the notions that there are poor people around in the world, the poor kids. When I was a kid, I was more interested in kids that had circumstances that were widely different from mine. Part of it because my mom was a pediatrician and she had an office in the city, but she also was very involved in an NGO that was working with children victims of war. Mm-hmm. In fact, the country where she spent a lot of her time working is now very much in the news because it's El Salvador. Mm-hmm. But before that, she went to many other countries, and she would come back and show us slideshows of what she had seen, and it kind of struck me that these children, just because they were born in the wrong country or in a different set of circumstances, had a life that was so much harder and probably so much more circumscribed than mine, with so little opportunities. So I always thought, is this kind of a gigantic debt that I have to the world. Maybe it was somewhat self-aggrandizing to think that way, but this is really how I thought about it when I was little. And I have to devote my life to repay the debt of the incredible cosmic luck that I have to be born in the middle class in Paris, as opposed to, in the Sahara or in the DRC or something like that. So it was kind of stayed with me, and for the longest time, I really didn't know how to put that into practice. And I sort of followed the path of least resistance of a good students in France, studying for exams and so on. As a matter of fact, I thought I would be a historian. And came a time where, somewhere in the middle of college, where I felt that I was really so protected and I had a life that was so comfortable, both intellectually and physically. I lived in this wonderful dorm in the center of Paris. I was paid to study. I had the best friends, and we had classes, like seminars with 5 people in them and so on. And I was like, I'm making no progress in repaying my cosmic debt. And it made me a little jittery. So I decided I have to change my path. And so I thought maybe I should go into politics, because I would have a more direct impact on life of people. But I was a little suspicious that I would like it, because I don't really like shortcuts. So I thought, okay, let me just take a step back and move country and figure out what I can do. And it turns out my school had an exchange with Russia. So I was like, I'll go to Russia for a year. And I went to Russia for a year, and I was teaching French in a university there. And by some really totally accidental reasons, I met 2 economists. One of them happened to be a professor at MIT at the time, Thomas Piketty, and the other was a professor back in my college. And through them, I got in touch with many people, many economists in Russia at the time. This was the middle of the transition, so people were very busy. And I watched what they were doing. They plugged me in to be research assistants and so on. I spoke Russian, so I could be more or less useful, despite knowing no economics. And I watched with a mixture of dread and being very impressed what they were doing, because I thought they have a tremendous amount of influence. And they were academic economists, many of them from Harvard, who were kind of advising the government. And they were really like making major decisions, or having their finger on major decisions, on the basis, I thought, of not very much knowledge, because it's not that anybody had a lot of knowledge about how to radically turn the ship. But I thought, okay, this is it. I can go back to my cosmic debt. I'm going to learn economics. And then I'm going to be able to, as an academic, have influence maybe on the way that economic decisions are being made that concerns the poor. So with that plan hatched in Russia, kind of went back to France. I had to basically cram 5 years of economics into one, so that I could then apply to graduate school. And then I came to MIT and started working on this problem. So I came here, I think it was incredible luck in a way, because I think for many PhD students, after they are done with their classes, they're a bit fumbling around, figuring out what they should do research on. And I was on a mission. I still am on the mission. That's the same one. So
that's fantastic. It's great to hear that story, and I think also for many people who start their learning journey, not knowing what intellectual tools will solve the problems that they want to do, and that's a great story. Let me talk about you becoming a teacher. Right. So what inspires you in the classroom, right? What do you get most excited about, whether it's an in-person classroom on campus or when you're teaching online?
So in the story that I tell, there are really these like powerful professor figures. My professor from France, his name was Daniel Cohen. He recently passed away. He was an amazing teacher in the sense that he was able to connect quite complicated concept to real world situations and make them speak to each other in ways that were really remarkable. And he was also a great exponent, writing excellent popular audience books for the same reason. And that was, of course, very important in my decision to switch to economics, because in the course of working for him, I had really the occasion of like hearing the way he was talking. So, and of course, at various other moments in my life, I was exposed to wonderful teachers. So it's pretty essential to I think the people meet many people, I'm sure, who are able to pinpoint the one teacher in their life or the several teachers in their life, either in grade school or in high school or in college, that made a difference. Teaching at MIT and teaching online is, of course, a very different ball game. It's a different objectives. The MIT students are like amazingly sharp, and especially I teach a freshman class, which I really love to teach, because you don't have to assume any. I assume that nothing is known, and that it's a blank page, but that anything can be. That there's no concept that you cannot bring. And I think this attitude I try to take to all my teaching and my writing, whether at MIT or online, is to never assume that the person in front of you is not ultra sharp and ultra smart and can understand what you're telling them. So anything can be approached. And in fact, in France, you mentioned my teaching gig in France is kind of an on and on teaching gig. It's totally open. There are 2,000 people in the auditorium. Most of them are above 70, and they have never done economics in their whole life. And I teach them the same thing that I teach them, but not in the same way.
Nice.
But so it's really lovely to teach to MIT students, undergraduates or graduate students. The undergraduates, what I love with the freshmen also is I teach a communication intensive class. So I make people talk and prepare things and get like engaged with really practical problems, and they're delighted to have a chance to speak up. So it's very nice to give them this space. But it's very few people. So when I first got introduced with OpenCourseWare, I was really excited. I was like, oh, we can put what we do. But of course, at the very beginning of OpenCourseWare, we just put the class notes. So it's not it's not as interactive. Then I first got a chance of taking videotapes of my undergraduate freshman class to put on OpenCourseWare. And in the first minutes it's put, so many people get to watch the videos, and you're like, oh, this is great. This is more people than I will ever teach in person. And when MITx came on, and we could use the same video to structure something more with deeper engagement, I was even more excited by that, because I felt I can basically now almost teach the same way. The MIT students that I teach in person watch the same video as the online people, and basically take the class. Right. And then they come to class and they do something else with it. And the people in the world, they watch this video and presumably they also use it in a part of their life that's a different part. But the core is the same. And then the spokes are different in different parts of the world. And I think that's very powerful, in the sense that I don't think the people who are on MITx get a less good version. They just get a different version.
Yeah. No, that's crucial, and a lot of the learners have told us that they really value the idea that this is the exact same thing that MIT students on campus are getting.
That's
Right?
literally the same because they
Yes.
watch the same video.
Yeah, exactly.
And from
Yes.
time to time we teach again we teach the lecture again to the MIT students so that the class gets updated online and for the MIT students. So they can be sure that it's what is being taught online is really like the frontier of what we think the students would know if they were here.
Yeah. So, as if that weren't enough, then you went a step further and have developed a program, the MicroMasters program, right? In DEDP, Data Economics and the Design of Policy. Tell us, some of those learners are probably watching right now. But for those who don't know much about it, tell us about it and how it works and your reflections on that.
Yeah, so this is a program that it's one of the things that I've done at MIT, maybe one of the top 3 things, and I don't even know what the other 2 are, that I'm the happiest I have done and the most proud I have done and the most grateful that that possibility was offered to me, because frankly it was a bit of we were all learning. Open learning people from engineers to leadership and us at the same time when we were trying to build this program. So the gamble of this program was if we can select people to come to MIT based on what we want them to do once they are at MIT, we would be able to completely break the mold of traditional admissions, admit an entire different set of people who would probably never have made it to MIT, and they will do great. So this was really the core of the gamble. How you make that work is by having the equivalent of 1 semester of worth of upper level undergraduate / master's classes online through the MITx classes. So for us, there is now a choice, but there is probability and statistics, there is development economics, or there is microeconomics, there is public policy, and so on. Political economy, you have a bit of a choice, but 5 classes, which people can either do in one very dense semester if they want to. Some people do that, but most people take while they're doing something else on the side, 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. And then we admit students to spend 1 semester at MIT based almost exclusively on how well they do in these classes. I'm saying almost exclusively because we get their info and we are also pay a lot of attention to what they write, why they want to come, what people write about them, what are the experience. But that way we don't need to worry so much about trying to understand what their grades might be or might mean. Or you don't need to have gone to college. One of our most successful students had not graduated high school when he applied to our program, and he's now in the PhD at MIT, having never completed an undergraduate degree. Another person had gone to college in Mexico, but he, due to various difficulties in his life, never managed to finish college. But he did great in the classes. We admitted it. He graduated with this program. Today he's working at the OECD. Another person who is here this year is from Somaliland and had left Somaliland a grand total of once to go to Kenya. But had worked in UNHCR with refugees and so on, and managed to take all the classes and so on. So it's really an amazingly diverse group of people in terms of their experiences, what they bring to the table, and so on. But what they have in common is, number 1, extraordinary drive, because to finish the pretty hard classes online from Somaliland, it takes more than great, double great.
Yeah.
And number 2, of course, the raw cognitive skills and firepower to be able to do this. And so the first part of the gamble of having a much more diverse class, like 100%. The second part of the gamble, when they came to MIT, we now have several cohorts. They are systematically the best in the classes they take. Both when they take master's level, like MEng level classes, or upper level undergraduates, which are also cross-registered master's students, and even in PhD classes. That's because they bring in a thirst for knowledge that none of our other students have. The undergraduates, God bless them, are a little blasé, trying to go as far as, trying to check as many boxes as they can. The PhD students are tie themselves into knots, wondering what is going to be helpful for their dissertation. And our master's DDP students, they just are delighted to be here. And they want to take the most out of MIT, and they do. And they contribute so much to the classes, and they change the energy and the dynamic of the class. Everybody loves them in our department to have them in the class. So I think it's really been amazing. And again, it wasn't obvious. Like we had to shepherd it through the process, get it approved in the faculty committee, and every step people were like, "Are you sure this can work?" Like, of course, we're not sure it can work. We certainly hope. Yeah. But it's really been a huge success. When they come, we tell them they have to change the world. That's the only reason why we took them, and that's the metric of success. And now they really are busy doing that.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. I love that metric of success, of changing the world. But let me drill down on that one actually a little bit, because in the field of economics, of course, you're very well known, famous, right, for demanding rigorous measurement of policy outcomes. So how does that shape your approach to learning outcomes? Right, and how have you kind of used some of those insights from your research methodologies to think about metrics of success for the DDP MicroMasters, or even just for individual courses?
Well, I have to admit, not so much, in the sense that what I do for a living as a development economist to set up randomized controlled trials, so to have treatment and control that are randomly selected, and we've never done that with a DDP in any way, shape, or form. We take the best students, as we take only 20 students, 25 students every year. We take the people whom we think are going to make the most of MIT, and we have no scope to randomizing. So who knows? But so in that sense, I don't have like proof that the DDP is making a difference. But what I can see is what they do, moving ahead, where they the positions where they end up. This is really what interests us. The grades are important because it shows that they fit in MIT. And as I was telling you, the distribution of DDP students' grades stochastically dominate that of non-DDP students' grades. So that's interesting. In terms of the selection being successful. But what is even more important is what they do later. Some go back to their country where they came from, some go back to the industry they came from, many shift or go elsewhere, some work in international organizations, and we are in contact with pretty much the entire network. And I do know that they everywhere, the type of institution that welcome them always tell us to send more of that. Right. Do you have more like that? And we do every year. We have one more cohort.
Yeah, that's great. Here's a question you may get sometimes from all kinds of learners or people who are outside of economics and looking in. Some of your courses, and I can say this as a learner, some of your courses are really hard, very demanding, right? So when someone is struggling, either to begin to learn economics or to complete a course, how do you get them motivated and keep them motivated?
So there are two ways to answer this question. One is a little glib, but I'm going to start with that, which is we started at that pretty high level. You know, we are started at the level of a master's program at MIT, so it's not going to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise, you know. I had a textbook in macroeconomics that said some say it's enough to have high school mathematics to learn economics, but it would have to be a pretty good high school. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a little bit the same here. You know, it is what it is. Like we can't at the same time say after this and coming to MIT, you'll be at the top of your class and say, by the way, it's going to be easy. So in the sense, that's a program that's for people who are reasonably prepared and very committed. So that's the glib answer. And then part of me feels that therefore we should have a lot of scaffolding, and I'll come back to the scaffolding part in a moment, which is fine. You can end there, but you should start. You should start so that you can bring more people to that level, knowing that it's not going to be like the whole world. But in a sense, our MOOC doesn't bear as well, but it's not particularly massive, nor is it maybe destined to be massive. It's relatively advanced material. So that's the glib answer. Now the less glib answer is how do we do the scaffolding? So the part of it is happening within the course itself. So for example, say if the probability and statistics class, for example, you take the data analysis class, it starts from probability and ends at machine learning, starting with probability from the foundation. So in a sense, it doesn't have many prerequisites. Is as long as you are tightening your belt and ready to stick. Right. With the exception of, for the data analysis exercise, you need to be able to use the software. And then for that, we prepared a lot of modules that people can do before, so they can, you know, before they even start, so they have time to familiarize themselves with R is the language we use, and they'll get help to do that, and a lot of tutorials. So by the time they launch the class, they have that in place. And we have a lot of community TA on the platform that help out. So that's kind of the within platform help. And then I also realized that for a lot of people, it's not enough, and yet a lot of people who could succeed if they got more help. I also know that only very few people will be able to come to MIT because MIT is not that big, so we won't be able to expand the program infinitely. So for these two reasons, what we've engaged in the last couple of years is an effort called ADAPT, where the A is for alliance. And it's now trying to form a network of schools that will use the DEDP material, the DEDP courses, as a corpus in a way, in different ways. And one of the ways in which they can use it is they can take the online classes and teach them as flipped classroom, using their time in class to reinforce, help out, etc. So, for example, we are doing that. One of our adept nodes is the statistical school in Côte d'Ivoire, NCA. Their advanced undergraduate can take our classes, and they get support. Right. And at the end of the class, they validate the MIT class. And eventually, it's not quite done, but we are moving towards the fact that they'll also get credit for that class at NCA itself. So that's this ADAPT is now what we are trying to create in a lot of places, including replicating the MIT model. So that they would be, as the pipeline grows of people who have taken those classes, there'll be outlets for them to go to. So NCA is going to start its own master's degree. In Brazil, we just launched at INSPIRE. They are going to start their own master's degree. Princeton is now going to admit into their master's degree students who have finished the MicroMasters, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, the idea there is to use the material, not just like this is here in the world, if you can swim, swim,
Right.
otherwise
Yeah.
you sink, but
That's fantastic. And it gets, in some ways, all of that gets back to your comments at the beginning, right? About sort of, thinking that, anyone that you meet and talk to, has the capabilities, right, to kind of engage with this material, even if they may not have had the prior preparation, right?
So one in moving forward I would like to start earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Which is there are many kids who, say for example, very talented kids who don't get to the level where they would even hear of this program, or they don't have the math that's necessary and so on. And I would like to make sure that those kids are not lost, or few of those kids are lost. So one of the projects I'm working on, it's in Tamil Nadu, in the south of India. We work with AOPS, the platform of very advanced math classes that many MIT students take as enrichment. And they gave us a bunch of licenses. AOPS stands for Art of Problem Solving, and it's many, many online classes, very good level. They gave us access to licenses that we can give to the kids. And we are engaged this time in a randomized control trial where we give out those licenses to kids in the middle of nowhere in rural Tamil Nadu, or on the contrary, in a slum in urban Chennai, and see whether they manage to do well in the classes and do better in their coursework, but more importantly, kind of get into STEM and so on, whereas otherwise they would have been, kind of giving up school even though they are super talented. So that's kind of one other way to take this problem, is saying, well, we can kind of lift the boats a little bit in advance, so that more people would be able to get into our program, or any other really that would start at the more advanced college level. So eventually there is maybe a whole pipeline.
Right, that's fantastic. All right, so what I want to do now is switch to some of the questions that we've had from our audience. And what I'll do is I'll be asking a few questions that we got in advance, and sometimes I'll be bringing together questions from people who asked very similar ones online. Most of these are questions people asked ahead of time. Some of you will be providing questions, if we're watching online live. And we'll be sure to get all of these questions to Professor Duflo, and some of them we'll be able to answer, some of them, but there's already more questions asked than we can ever get to. So let me just start with the first one. And many of them actually focus on your research in economics and poverty alleviation, and what it means to do that now in 2025. And then we'll switch back to some questions about teaching and learning. But here's a question, and this combines ones from Corinne and Ulysses and Joe, that works out to something like this. What are some of the consistent obstacles in alleviating poverty, and how can technology, funding, and public policy play the most effective role in overcoming those obstacles? This is a question I'm sure you think about every day. This is that motivation question you talked about at the beginning.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest obstacle is that a lot of people whose job it is to do this, like policymakers, but also people in NGOs, activists, so on, are extraordinarily well-intentioned, but they believe they know significantly more than they do. So people launch into massive programs on the basis of very little evidence and a lot of goodwill, and a lot of these things end up falling flat.
Or worse.
Or worse. So that's why I spent a lot of my energy trying to. A related problem is that most people feel that there is one answer to the entire problem of poverty. which of course makes very little sense because it's so many different problems. It's the equivalent of saying there is one drug for cancer. That's just not how it works. In poverty, likewise, there are issues with education, there are issues with health, there are issues with environment, and they're all different problems that we can take one by one. So that's why a lot of my work is to really try to convince people to say, okay, let's relax. What's really your ambition in this program? Maybe it's ending poverty, but closer to us. You know, what's the immediate outcome that you seek, and what are the various ways that you could seek it, and what's the most effective? What are you sure about? What should we try out? Including different versions of the same thing, because often the details is really in the devil is really in the details. So I think the biggest obstacle to poverty is what we, with Abhijit Banerjee in Poor Economics, we call the 3I, which is ideology, ignorance, inertia.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And a follow-up question on that is that how do the obstacles vary in different parts of the world, whether that's different countries or regions, or even within a country, urban areas versus rural areas? Are there sort of patterns you see, or are these just fundamental obstacles to the work?
The problems are very different often, depending on the context. For example, if we think about health, a problem in rural area might be that people are quite far from a health facility. A problem in an urban area might be that there are like thousands of doctors within a space this size, but none of them is any good. So those are different problems that require different solutions. So the problems can be quite different in different countries, in different contexts. Some of them you can find sort of commonalities across problems. But the approach always remains the same, which is being open-minded and curious and experimental and willing to be wrong.
Okay, let me switch to another question. This is actually somewhat of a more teaching-focused question, but it can also affect all many areas that you work in. So this is combines questions from three of our viewers, Jose Maria, Danielle, and Zarif, who want to understand how sharing educational resources can affect change, right? So in some ways, it's bringing these two together, right? Is this kind of teaching part of poverty alleviation? And also, what are some of the challenges in contexts of or settings where things like electricity and internet access are really limited?
So let me take the two halves of the question separately. So yes, I think the teaching, and in particular this kind of open learning and then the branching out to adapt, is a critical part of the effort, because I'm just one person. I'm going to do, I don't know, maybe write, if I'm very productive, 100 papers in my life. I actually have no idea.
That's a lot.
But that's not very many, It's and in fact, when we got the Nobel Prize, that's immediately what we said, is that that's not for us. This is for the movement. This is for all of the people who are doing this work of trying out one thing after the other, like both the people who are in the field implementing, the researchers who are running it. So very early on, actually, the moment I got, almost the minute I started teaching at MIT, I was convinced that what we needed to do is to not just run trials, but set up an infrastructure to make it easier for others to do it. Otherwise, it would remain a completely niche activity that would have no impact beyond very few people. Hence, JPAL, which was basically from the get-go, it was let's start a network of people who do this at MIT, not at MIT, in the whole world, to put in common lessons about how to do things or not to do things, infrastructure, recruiting research assistant, money raising, and the like. And JBL has been quite successful at creating this network effect. So there are now 1,000 researchers all over the world, and together the research is so much more powerful. And it had affected quite a few people. The current number is 600 million people who have been affected, not directly by the research we run, but by programs that have been scaled up after we found them to be effective. But it's still not enough by far. And many more people need to be able to do this work, and many more policymakers need to be able to understand it, understand why they need to do it. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be really distributed better geographically. Mm-hmm. Because although technically our 1,000 researchers are all over the world, in practice there are still many in the US or in Europe. But the work needs to be done everywhere. I mean, there is poverty in the US, so some work needs to be done in the US, but the work needs to be done everywhere. And although, of course, I feel perfectly capable of doing research in India, it's even better if I have an Indian co-author that can do it with me. Or in fact, it would be great if teams made entirely of Indian researchers could add the wherewithal to figure out the project, find the money, and so on. And for that, we need many more people trained. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't happen just like that. Like, it cannot happen by fiat. Said, go find yourself a collaborator in Benin if nobody's learning economics in Benin. Mm-hmm. Hence, the really key part of sort of JPAL 3.0, if you want, is to be able to network not just the infrastructure of research, but the infrastructure of teaching, mm-hmm. such that people can be trained to do this type of work from the point of view of being a researcher or being a policymaker or being an activist or working in a company. Everywhere in the world, which is why our ADEPT, we started with Côte d'Ivoire, we're going to Brazil, mm-hmm. Now we have several places in Europe as well. We need to be like all over the place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then just on that second half, what do we do with that last mile?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So, for example, in the case of the Art of Problem Solving project, we realized pretty early on it was going to be an issue. We didn't think so because network connectivity is very good in Tamil Nadu, electricity is not bad, and we thought students mostly had access to a smartphone. Mm-hmm. But then we realized that they have access, but they don't really have access in the sense that maybe it's their father's phone, the father is away, they can't have access to the phone. So we realized if this program was going to work, we needed to give them tablets. Mm-hmm. And we did. Mm-hmm. And that makes a huge difference to this basic infrastructure. So the good thing is that this is only improving. Most of Africa the expansion of cell phone has been something quite phenomenal. Most of Africa is covered by cell phone connectivity. So this barrier will progressively be less and less. I'm pretty confident of that. But for example, electricity is a huge need. One of the key need of many countries in Africa today, where the poor have very little access.
Yeah. So this is another question that came from multiple people in different angles, which is, many are sort of admirers of your work, both your academic work and the work that does in the world, and are just wondering, what are the challenges you're facing in 2025, right? In a complicated global environment where you're adjusting to many different contexts, constraints, and policies, and both, of course, here in the United States, but really around the world, and just how has that shaped your thinking and also your practice?
How much time do you have? Yeah. So that I can list all of my issues. Well, it's been a pretty wild ride. Mm-hmm. With, of course, the shutting down of USAID within days of inauguration. We had quite a bit of USAID funding. So many projects got cut midway, and till date, a lot of the bills for past work haven't even been paid yet. So that creates all sorts of issues. We are assuming that they are going to be paid. We want to believe in the rule of law, but and of course, it's, as you say, it's not just the US. It's in general. So in France, for example, the foreign cooperation budget has also been cut in about 35%. In Germany as well, in the UK about half. And within that, except for France, I have to say, where they really preserved the sort of research wing of the development assistance. In other places, it's kind of the first thing to go, because at the same time as you cut the total volume, there is also a need to reorient towards priorities like either people literally starving because of the end of USAID, or Ukraine because of the end of the support to Ukraine. So from the point of view of funding for our work, it's not the easiest time by far. Not to mention that we are within a university, and in particular elite universities, and those universities are also under attack, and as part of them, we also suffer the indirect consequences of that as well. So it has immediate implication of day-to-day life, what can be funded, what can be done, and so on. At the same time, I don't think it changes really anything to the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because aid is like a microscopic amount was. Now it's even more microscopic. You really need like a special physics microscope to see it. But even before that, it was a pretty small part of the amount of money that was spent on the poor worldwide. Most of the money that is spent on the poor worldwide is the money that's being that is being raised by those countries. And so they used to spend their money, and a little bit of USAID money, and now they spend only their money. Even before, I was mainly interested in making sure that the entirety of the budget of these countries is spent in the most effective way possible to serve their own priorities of each and every one of these countries. So I never really saw myself as having much to do with aid. I now realize I had more to do with aid than I thought, because I was financially dependent on it for my work. But that's my problem. The fact is, my work was and still is relevant to my customers, who is not the US government, who is not the French government, but who are the people who live in these countries. And so we'll find other ways to make ourselves useful. When I started doing this type of work, there was no, USAID was funding zero research. And the NIH was not funding any international development. So it's not that we had money, we scrambled. So now we are back into a bit more of a scrambling world. But hopefully the fact that in the meantime, I think the attitude in many of the developing countries has really changed in terms of pragmatism, in terms of identifying the problems they really care about, in terms of trying solutions, learning from other experiences, and so on. So we can continue at least sharing evidence, trying to generate evidence locally, and find a way to finance this one way or the other. So it's going to change maybe my time allocation, but I don't think it changes really anything to what I need to do. And in a sense, I mean, the US shouldn't have to inflate an image of its own importance in the rest of the world. Maybe after some time they'll realize like everybody is moving on, and
Yeah. And that motivating mission that you talk about, that sort of debt that you started at the beginning, that's something you're still...
That's very much there. And in a sense, it's still very, very important to know for the kids, say for the kids of Tamil Nadu, whether the government of Tamil Nadu wants to know whether giving them access to AOPS with tablets makes a difference to their learning. And if it does, they'll find a way to finance the program down the line. And
no, thanks for that. That's a really important message that I think people looking in from around the world and looking here at MIT and at American universities right now will really value that message from you.
I think what it will do is to accelerate the realization, which was already coming anyways, that foreign aid is a little irrelevant, and that the northern country were punching above their weight, given what they were giving and the influence they had in exchange. And think now that they're giving nothing, they're going to get no influence, and then they are going to feel sad about it. But people would have moved on.
Okay. So we've talked about you as a researcher and as a teacher. Now it's time to talk about you as a student. So we are all lifelong learners. So what's something that you don't know now that you want to learn next?
Oh, so many things. I always try to pick research projects that are a little just above my current frontier of what I know. For example, I wanted to teach myself a lot of statistics and econometrics and machine learning. So I started doing a project on the econometrics of experiment, not knowing really much about it. So I kind of was very excited to learn this material. And I'm continuing to do that. So I have more econometrics and statistics to learn. And another thing I want to, now I'm very interested by force, because it's such an important issue looming in our lives about climate change, because in the next few decades, that's really going to be the defining feature for many of the poor countries, which also happen to be hot countries, and therefore where the warming will have a disproportionate influence. So a lot of my kind of advocacy job is really about compensating poor people for climate change that they haven't caused, but they are bearing the consequences of. And that I can do in a sense with what I know, but there's so much to learn about this whole field. Much of it is in economics, but some of it is in many other fields about how one models climate change, what we think is going to happen, and thinking about the subtlety about determining the effect, how we think about how people are going to adapt, and so that's another big things. Yeah. Then nothing to do with economics. I used to play a lot of music when I was a kid. And now my kids, and then I stopped coming to MIT actually as a PhD student until through college I played music. And then I stopped because, well, I played cello and I didn't have money to bring the cello because you need to pay a seat to the cello. And I don't know, I didn't think that I could rent one. It didn't occur to me, but I really also had no money at all. So anyways, I stopped playing music at the time. And now my kids are playing music and they are becoming quite good. So I feel I need to relearn to play music. That's another thing that's kind of.
That's fantastic.
It was in the back of my mind, but it's moving towards the front.
That's fantastic. Right. That's really great. Any final thoughts or words, advice to our learners about what to do next?
Well, I think finding any course, like of course this is my course, I'm very happy, but any course anywhere, like physics or math or literature or language, anything you enjoy, and kind of try to stick till the end of the course is what I would advise, because a lot of people start but then kind of life overtakes. But I feel this is when you manage to go above that step that suddenly the perspective really open. So it really doesn't really matter what people do, or like whatever strikes your fancy, but just kind of try to really stick with it. And I don't know if it's born by data, but my intuition is that once people manage to finish a course, the next one become much more easy and natural. And there is such a big world out there, and the quality is so excellent that make the most of it. And know that if you finish the DEDP program, for example, or another of the MicroMasters program offered, and you do come to MIT, you'll have so much to bring to this campus, and you'll get so much from it that it will be transformational both ways.
Oh, man. Well, thank you. On that note, just huge thanks to you, and good luck with the cello lessons. We'll be expecting a concert performance next year. Right? And so just to thank also our viewers who are joining us online. This has been really an inspirational conversation. We want to thank you for tuning in to listen, and encourage you to share what you learned here with colleagues, with friends, with your networks on social media and elsewhere. And share your experience and your own story as a learner, right? As someone engaging with MIT's open learning resources. And of course, we also ask for those of you who are in a position to do so to consider donating to support our efforts and to support the work of your fellow learners and the impact that MIT and colleagues such as Professor Duflo can share with us. So until our next conversation, happy learning, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, not only for this conversation, but for, on behalf of MIT and Open Learning, for making this possible, because I think it required an amount of imagination that's quite remarkable, and also it requires a day-to-day dedication and dogged hard work that you guys online might not realize, but I can assure you is there. So thank you so much for persisting to this and for all the people who were involved in this effort, with whom it's always been a pleasure collaborating.
Thank you. All right.